It's insane. I know a lot of people go to Mexico to do their surgeries for cheap, whether it's LASIK, Botox, BBL, you name it. And for the most
Or
part,
just to get prescription medications.
that's another one, right?
Hmm.
Everything's cheap over there. We know this.
Yeah.
Medicine is cheap, surgeries are cheap. But what happened, Gabe? Listen,
So this group of four from South Carolina crossed at the Matamoros checkpoint, which is across from Brownsville, Texas. And within a short amount of time, they were caught in the crossfire of a shootout between the Cartel and some opponents. I don't know who they were shooting it out with, but probably another cartel or something, or subsidy of a cartel. Two of them were killed. The other two were kidnapped, and eventually they were returned after the U.S. threatened to send in troops, and they were returned along with the cartel members that were responsible for it, along with an apology letter.
man, honestly, I'm like, and okay, like I know we kind of briefly discussed this before the podcast, but let's rewind a bit.
Hmm.
When we were young, we would freely go cross the border. I'm from Laredo.
Hmm.
And when I was 16, 17 years old, not even 18 yet, we would cross the border to go to Mexico. And it was like, it wasn't just you and your friend, like, we're like, oh, we're doing something we're not supposed to do.
Yeah.
Literally the opposite, right? It was, you would see groups of people, groups of
Families.
teenagers. Yeah. And it was at night, mind you, 11, midnight, right? Crossing the border. And it was like a thing. It was like everyone was lining up to get into the club,
Hmm.
right? Now, nobody goes over there. And I don't even say now, but years later, a couple years after that, we started, hearing like you started seeing in the news and you started hearing about your own friends or like classmates that crossed over to Mexico, right?
Yeah.
To party, to go to the bars, to drink illegally because you weren't 21 yet,
It's
obviously.
not illegal when you're in Mexico.
Well, you're right, but you knew it was legal, right? Technically,
At home.
at home, right? Like who endorsed that message, right? You didn't hear your friends come back. You didn't see your friends come back. You knew people were missing. It was very obvious it was no longer okay and safe to go to Mexico,
Yeah.
right? To go to Mexico and party. So what's really interesting is I don't ever recall a time where the US said, hey guys, we're about to step in. We're bringing in the National Guard or we're bringing the military or whatever the case. And we're going to go ahead and, take over. Like I've never seen that be the case. So
Yeah.
why now? Why all of a sudden? Why now?
I think that now, we're seeing this call for military intervention because, with the border crisis that's been going on and everything, as far as, the immigrants and everything coming across, the increase in fentanyl overdoses, which are being supplied by the cartels, and just the threat of violence that Americans face going to Mexico is just kind of like a cherry on top for all of that. So I think some of these government officials maybe are saying enough is enough and we need to do something about it because Mexico's not doing anything about it. We know that Mexican politicians have their hands in the cookie jar. They're there with the cartels and work with the cartels. They're funded by the cartels. Um, Not to say that they're all bad, but those that are good usually end up with their heads cut off, decapitated on the side of the road somewhere. So I think if they're not going to be doing anything, then the government officials think that we need to do something about it, right? So
So, what's crazy about that is like you made some great points, right? But it's like I do always feel like when it comes to the US intervening in any kind of situation like that, they have to have a motive. I don't know how worried or concerned they are about what's going on in our backyard because let's face it, Mexico has been not only corrupt, but their economy has been literally just sinking
mhm.
for the last couple decades, right? Maybe longer.
Yeah, so it's been getting
I
increasingly
mean,
more and more
the
dangerous.
peso is, but going back, it's like you have a motive, right? Like Okay, 4 people died. And I'm not saying, oh, who cares? 4 people died. I'm saying 4 people died,
5 cents.
and now what? You know what I mean? Like, how many people have died in the arms of the cartel? These guys, they don't care. Like, I had an uncle that went over there a few years ago. I don't know why. Don't ask me why.
Hmm.
He took his brand new Toyota
Hmm.
truck, and on the way back, and it wasn't even like deep into Mexico, like where you're not supposed to be. It was like literally like in the Nuevo Laredo territory, right?
Hmm.
He was coming back, and he wasn't alone. He was with some family, and apparently, like a black SUV just pulls up in front of him. They get off the truck with guns, and they're like, "Give us your keys." Like, what are you gonna do, bro?
Yeah.
Like, okay, here's the keys. Don't
I'm
kill
gonna
me.
die over your truck.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like stuff like that happens every day. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? How do we get to this point where it's like, oh, this made mainstream media, right? And it's like, oh, now we have to do something about it. It's like, I don't know, man. I'm a little skeptical because I grew up in a border town and I witnessed a lot of this stuff. And it's like, at what point does the US decide, hey, we really have to start doing something now,
Yeah.
right? I don't feel like the narrative has changed much. It's very obvious that in Mexico, and you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know this, but it's very obvious that in Mexico, drug cartels, maybe there's not just one cartel, drug cartels rule the country,
Yeah.
right? The police can't do shit. They're owned by the cartels. The president, Andres Lopez,
Hmm.
I'm pretty fucking sure, drop the F bomb. I'm pretty sure that,
Classy.
yeah, I know, right? Kept the trash. I'm pretty sure that there's no way you can be in politics in Mexico and not have cartels in the same sentence. These guys decide ultimately, hey, if Andres is going to be president, then he's going to be on our side. And we got to make sure of that, or else,
Hmm.
right? You have the power of who knows how many thousands of men and kids, because they get kids involved too. They get them early,
Hmm.
right? They train them. You know, they give them guns. You know, it's like, what do you do with that? It's a new world order in Mexico, but nobody's gonna bat an eye, and I'm gonna tell you why. Nobody bats an eye because when we think of Mexico as Americans, what do we think of?
So we think of, as a party destination, you think of Puerto Vallarta or Cancun or, anything like that. It's a party destination, wedding destination, honeymoon destination. Um, it doesn't, I think a lot of people think of cartels maybe in the back of their mind, but it's not at the forefront, that there's that danger over there in Mexico, that this violence can happen and it can happen to you and you could experience this violence. So, I just don't think people are aware of how serious, the cartels are over there.
You know, and to be fair, and thank you for pointing out the obvious about the average American or the typical American thinks of Mexico as like vacation destination point, right?
Hmm.
Cancun, one of the biggest destination points you can think of. But I think one thing that a lot of people don't realize, and while we may not have this written down in stone, is I'm pretty sure drug cartels own tourist sites, right? And it is not
Hmm.
just for Americans. Think about people from other countries, like Europe, for example, right?
Hmm.
Are they not thinking about traveling to Mexico? Or are they like, hey, I want to go to Mexico? I've never been there.
Hmm.
You know, and you go to Mexico and it's tourist friendly.
Yeah.
You've been to Cancun, it's like it's catered for the average tourist.
Hmm.
So it's like, is it in their best interest as a drug cartel, right? For Americans or other people from around the world to travel to Mexico to spend their hard earned dollars or whatever to attract that kind of tourism, right?
Hmm.
So that the economy can continue to grow. But remember, the economy can't thrive without money going into the country.
Yeah.
And money is obviously not going in from people who live in Mexico. Most Mexicans, and I mean, and I don't want to make it seem like, oh, every Mexican is poor. I'm not saying that. But if you compare the middle class in America to like the middle class in Mexico, it's day and night.
Oh yeah.
Those people aren't going to freaking tourist sites or like traveling in their own country and spending locally, you
Yeah.
know?
Vast majority of their population is impoverished,
Yes.
you know, and a middle class American would be wealthy in Mexico. Um, so I
Which is why some of them even move there.
yeah, exactly. I knew this guy that I used to work with in the oil field, and you know, in the oil field, he was making about 65,000 a year. But he was telling me about his house in Monterrey that was on top of a mountain with a 3-car garage, and how he had 4 cars and BMW.
Going back to that, it's like Mexico's been in a crisis
Yeah,
for a very long time. So am I kind of upset that the US is making it seem like we're the Lord and Savior coming in because 4 people got killed by a drug cartel? I call bullshit.
yeah,
I call bullshit. I say something's up. I don't know what they're working on. I don't know what the motive is, but I don't believe the US is for one bit heavily concerned about what's going on in Mexico, as they are, for example, of what's going on in Ukraine.
yeah. To hear the full episode, you can find us on every major podcast streaming service. Also, for more content like this, make sure you like and subscribe to us on YouTube and follow us on Instagram and Twitter. You can find our links in the bio and in the description below. Stay tuned, and we can't wait to see you back at the shack.